Well, it's that time of week again, Sunday evening. Welcome to Steve's Place. Tonight we have a really good show. We have Suzanne Price coming on, and she's really into the Tesla vision of creativity. And but before we go there, I just want to cover a few things here. I want to encourage everyone to become an exclusive member of YouTube. Tonight we have 2019 DVDs available, the entire conference, and tomorrow we'll be putting up the 2021 conference. So if you haven't gotten those yet, well, now's a good time to do it. You know, $9.99 gets you 24/7 access. And a reminder for this year's upcoming Extraordinary Technology Conference in Albuquerque, New Mexico, August 10th to 14th at the Crown Plaza. And without further ado, here comes Suzanne. You there, Suzanne?
I am here. Good evening, Steve. Nice to be here. Appreciate the opportunity to share with people.
So Suzanne has spoken at quite a few of our conferences, and if you go to our website, teslatech.info, you can find her, go to the speaker directory, and you can find them all listed, through there. And or you can go through each conference and check her out. Anyway, thank you much for participating all these years. And
you're welcome.
Without further ado, I'm going to let you just jump in there and tell about Tesla's visionary engineering.
Okay, I will do that. Thank you very much, Steve. So this evening, I'm going to give a presentation that's a little bit different than some of my conference presentations because this is oriented toward what I call soft technology. What we're going to do, and I'll show you my agenda here in a minute, is talk about Tesla's genius, what we can learn from it, a little bit of the science behind it, because I've been studying quantum mechanics for quite a while now. And I have my own point of view of that and combining it and learning from Mr. Tesla himself. And so after that, I'm also going to give you some tips about how we can connect with our own innate creativity. So let me begin. Everything for me this topic began with a magazine sitting on a doctor's coffee table. I looked at it, it said, "Genius happens." I wondered about that. I really did. Did it just happen, or is there a lot more to it? It's the old nature-nurture problem. Fate, were you born to do this, or is there a considerable amount of serendipity? I believe, as this man, David Schenck, the author of The Genius in All of Us, has said, anyone has the potential for genius, or at the very least, greatness. And he says it's virtually impossible to determine any individual's true intellectual limitations at any age, because anyone has the potential for genius, or at the very least, greatness. And I do completely believe in that. Now, here's what I'm going to cover. What is genius? A little bit about that, what people think of it. Is it nature versus nurture, or how does that work? Some of the basic characteristics of geniuses, and then in particular, Tesla's genius. I'm going to cover from his birth to about 24 or so years of age. What did he have? He started out with innate talents and intelligence. He had various traumas, illnesses, and he had a lot of training and discipline. After that, I'm going to give you my point of view. It is based on quantum mechanics and from a consciousness point of view. And I'm calling this resonant science and human quantum potential. I'll talk about some of the principles, such as vibratory synchronization. Talk and correlate this with physical and spiritual consciousness dimensions, because I think it's all consciousness anyway, down at the bottom line. Then how does it connect to people? Through our chakras, heart, and brain connections, and perhaps one of the most important aspects is the role of the pineal gland, which is our spiritual eye in the center of our brain. And when I get done showing you how this all connects together, I'd like to talk about what I call soft technology to access creative imagination. I'm going to give you some of my favorite techniques that I think work. See if they work for you. If you already know about some of them, fine. Maybe you'll get a few new ideas. We'll discuss a little bit about breathing, heart math and intentioning, creative visualization, lucid dreaming, meditation and contemplation techniques, the hemisync binaural beat, remote viewing, and even a little bit about soul travel. Now, most people think that genius is exceptional intellectual or creative power or any other natural ability. And this is how we may basically judge it. But I do believe, and I will say right up front, that I think it has a lot to do with your innate intuitive ability, your connection with the universal consciousness. There's many names for it, which I will show you in a moment. So a genius is a person who displays this exceptional intellectual ability or creative productivity, either by genetics or originality, and typically it is associated with someone who has achieved a great advance in the domain of knowledge. And generally, people define a high IQ, which starts at about 140 to 230. What you see there in the pictures is a person who is considered the smartest or had the greatest IQ ability of all time. His name was William James Sidis. And as a boy, he was analyzed at 250 to 300 IQ. That's unbelievable. And there he is in the lower picture. He died of suicide in 1944. I don't know the reason for his decease. Now, genius further. Is it something that's inherited or not? Or does it also come from exceptional achievement, which depends, at least to some extent, on things like opportunity, training, mastery of a domain, the capacity to experience flow, which I think is to be in the moment, autonomy, endurance, curiosity, open to new ideas, getting out of the box, and also some social influences in life. This certainly was true of Tesla. Here we have Einstein, considered one of the smartest men and geniuses of all time. He says, I am neither clever nor especially gifted. I am only very, very curious. And perhaps an amount of humility goes with all of those traits. When asked how it felt to be the smartest man alive, Albert Einstein replied, I don't know. You'll have to ask Nikola Tesla. And certainly all of us, especially those who have been with the Tesla Tech organization for many years like me, we know what Tesla's done. He is the master of the wheels of nature. He has catapulted our entire globe into our modern way of life with his inventions, which are many, many, which include the polyphase induction motor, robotics, the radio, laser beams, wireless communication, and the list goes on because he had many, many, many patents. He's literally changed the face of the way we live in our world today. So let's take a look at Tesla's background. What actually was there about Tesla that we can learn from and perhaps, upgrade, enhance, improve our own creativity? So let's look at that. Here we have Tesla, who was born in Croatia. And you'll see here on the map, he was born in Smiljan. He also lived in Gospic and a place called Karlovac, which is also known as Karlstad. This is a picture of his home currently. Picture a statue of Tesla here in the front, the house where he was born, and his father's, I guess you would call it, chapel, there at the Memorial Center. His father was Milutin and his mother, Georgina Duca Tesla. As you can see, a little hard maybe on this. I'm not sure what exactly you're seeing down there, but they were both born, raised, and deceased in the 19th century. Tesla's father was a very distinguished man. He was the son of an officer of Napoleon. His brother was a distinguished math professor at a prestigious institution. He was a very learned Serbian Orthodox clergyman and a scholar and natural philosopher of the classics. He possessed a very substantial library, which Tesla certainly took advantage of. It was one of his favorite places to be. Tesla's father was erudite, wrote poetry and sermons. He had a prodigious memory, recited lengthy works in several languages, and Tesla also learned several languages. He was humorous and witty. On the other side, he was a bit of a conservative, which is probably good for a dad to be, but he tended to be, because of that, a little bit inflexible. And I know that he tussled with Tesla about what career Tesla was to have in the future. But I think we know who won. Tesla's mother was descended from one of the oldest families in the country. Her father and grandfather were also inventors, making you wonder if a little of that rubbed off on Tesla, for sure. She was inventive and hardworking herself, very self-sacrificing, had many skills and fortitude for completely running the household. She had a major influence on Tesla as well. He had a beautiful mixture of both of these very outstanding individuals. Now, what he was taught at an early age, this gives us an indication, you begin to wonder, okay, these people were determined that they were going to, even though he was the fourth of 5 children, they started him young with his education. He was taught reason and critical thinking and discovering defects in forms of expression. He was able to repeat long sentences, perform mental calculations designed to strengthen his memory, which he really took advantage of later on. That really helped him. And also, interestingly enough, they engaged him in guessing games, such as guessing one another's thoughts. They really wanted him to not only utilize the left side of his brain, but the right and intuitive side of his brain as well, which is very critical, I think, to his creativity. Here we have a picture of Tesla. He had a poor, believe it, I was incredulous when I found this and read about it. He had poor self-esteem as a boy. Here you see the entire family. Here is Tesla, and he's off to the side, you will notice. But whatever that source of that poor self-esteem was, he certainly made up for it later on. And what happened? Trauma happened. His older brother, Daniel, who was also a gifted child, had a mysterious accident at the age of 12 and died. And this occurred from injuries when he fell off his horse when he was riding through a wood and a pack of wolves attacked him. He was thrown violently and he never really recovered from his serious wounds. This was when Tesla was only 5 years old. And you know that up until about 6 or 7, a child is still developing in the brain. They're still absorbing everything that has a major impact on them. And this proved to be quite correct for Tesla. He never quite got over this trauma. What happened? As a child, of course, he suffered from nightmares and hallucinations, which also began some of his obsessions and phobias that he had later in life, such as his phobia with germs, like Howard Hughes, maybe. He also had an obsession with women who wore jewelry, such as pearls in particular. He had some various quirky obsessions. He developed a fear of death and ghosts. And like his brother, he also experienced vivid images and flashes of intense light, which were triggered by external impressions or images from actual scenes. And I think this stems from what happened to his brother and afterwards. To overcome some of these frightening images, he had a compensation, where he conjured up new images in his mind. This might involve other people's houses, the people themselves, places, friends, and the life and he also mocked up models and drawings and things that he was particularly interested in. So here we have a very active imagination where he can actually conjure up these things. And, and it was from this that he developed his powers of observation and imagination as he went along in life. He was very keenly aware of the workings of nature. And from this, he developed engineering, electrical, and mechanical aspects in his head, mathematically treated and determined beforehand from available theoretical and practical material. Now I'm reading that, but I do want to go on and say this in Tesla's own words. He said, "Thus, I have been led unconsciously to evolve what I consider a new method of materializing inventive concepts and ideas, which is radically opposite to the pure experimental and is, in my opinion, ever so much more expeditious and efficient." In fact, that is one of his characteristics. Whereas science today and experimenters today largely, they might think about it, do a lot of experiments, trial and error, common, but they finally get to it. But Tesla did all of this in his head first. Tesla was extremely well educated, self-educated. He never stopped learning, and he constantly read, especially from his father's library. And one of the books that had a definite influence on Tesla's creativity was a novel entitled Abafi. And it was a story of the spiritual transformation of a man through sheer willpower. The author here is Josica Miklos, who was born in Romania and was a Hungarian. And this was a thrilling story for Tesla. And he was so enthralled with this struggle and transformation that it awakened his own power of will and self-control. He practiced it until he felt that he mastered it. And later in life, he claimed that this was one of the things that helped him overcome the habit of, believe it or not, addictive gambling, excessive smoking, and drinking coffee. I don't know how much coffee he drank, but I like my cup. I don't know about you. Now, his inventiveness and his interest in nature really started his career, I think, when he was only 6 years old, because he had all these natural inclinations. Like any young boy, he took apart clocks, made pop guns, swords. He did all those things. Let's take it apart and see how it works. And one day, when his family had moved from Semiljan to Gospic, not too far away, he became the hero of the day when the town had bought a new fire department engine, and they were demonstrating it, and the hose that was in the river collapsed. Then nobody knew what to do, but Tesla did. Here he is, 6 years old. He waited out there, and he got it to going again and became the hero of the town. That was perhaps a small portent of the talents that he was to exhibit later. Tesla attended normal school in Gospic between the ages of 6 and 10, and he became very, very interested in mechanical models and water turbines. You see the turbines there at Niagara Falls on the right there. And he was fascinated, in fact, by Niagara Falls. And he pictured a big wheel run by the falls, and he told his uncle that he was going to go to America and carry out his scheme, which he did 30 years later. And I do want to show you a few pictures. I had the privilege of visiting Niagara Falls and the Tesla Memorial and Park there. And on the left, you see as the Niagara Falls, what he was able to build with his polyphase induction motor, his alternating current. And he, for those of you who don't know, he won a sort of a tussle with Thomas Edison over direct versus alternating current. And he won the battle in those days. And so his motors were then constructed here at Niagara Falls and started the electrification of America, and for that matter, the rest of the world. So here's what it looked like. Today, if you could see it, see the buildings there in the lower picture, below it is where it was. It is abandoned. There's just the remnants that are left there. But I'll tell you, although Tesla perhaps suffered some lack of notoriety for a while in spite of his inventiveness, he has come around to getting the accolades that he finally deserves. And when I was in the Tesla Visitor Center there, their introduction for people touring was all about Tesla and how he changed the world here. And on the American side, on Goat Island, here is a monument to Tesla, and there is also one, the Tesla statue, on the Canadian side. Okay, so his early inventiveness at these schools, when he was at what they call in Europe the real gymnasium, he continued to be fascinated by mechanical and electrical experiments, models, and scientific apparatus, and what they called the new physics department. Stop for a minute. Can you imagine a physics department for 6 to 10-year-olds? This picture here might be representative of the kind of school that you would find. And this is actually a little bit later, because he was born in 1856. So anyway, Tesla had the opportunity to fiddle around and experiment. He loved the math. He could perform operations in his head, and he became obsessed with producing continuous motion through steady air pressure and working with the opportunities of the vacuum. Kind of like what he was doing when he saved the day in Gospic. What happened at this point was, at the age of 10, he contracted severe illness. And this was to happen throughout his life, but it was also an incentive for him through willpower to overcome it. He had some serious illnesses, and the doctors didn't know what to do. They gave up on him. But during his convalescence, he was permitted to read books from the public library, some of which captivated him to forget all about his hopeless state. And one of these persons, it was reading Mark Twain, that caused what he said was a miraculous recovery. So here we have the adventures of Huckleberry Finn, which really intrigued him. And funny, I find it these days that the adventures of Huckleberry Finn is apparently not so politically correct anymore and is on a banned reading list, but not my list. And also the picture below, interestingly enough, Tesla and Mark Twain became very good friends, and here he is with Tesla in his laboratory in 1894. Later on, at the High Real Gymnasium, which is for a little older students, which he attended in 1870 to 73, this was in Karlovac, also called Karlstad, Croatia. Here he lived with his aunt and her husband. He was a colonel from the military, so their lifestyle was a bit more, shall I say, conservative, refined, even artistic. And Tesla here distinguished himself in physics and math. He had a very excellent, clever, and original teacher, Professor Martin Sekulich. And I believe, we all need a teacher like this in our lives, at least one of them, and this was the man. Tesla became more and more intrigued with electricity, physics, and math, and he was able to perform integral calculus in his head. Can you imagine that? We, in our culture these days, who are so dependent on our little computers and our cell phones that have all these apps. Tesla graduated in a 4U program with honors in 3 years. He completely excelled. He was excited about what he was learning. So then, while he was there in Karlstad or Karlovac, Croatia, he contracted more illness. This area of Croatia had a geography that was low and marshy, and he contracted malaria, had to drink a lot of quinine. Upon returning home, he then contracted cholera and was confined to bed for 9 months, scarcely able to move. He was at death's door, so to speak, and exhausted, and his father was frantic, tried to cheer Tesla up. And in Tesla's own words, he said, "Perhaps I may get well if you let me study engineering," because you see, his father wanted him to become a clergyman like himself. And so his father relented and said he could go to the best technical school in the world. And then, as if a miracle, Tesla came to life just like Lazarus emerging from the dead. But you see a pattern here of achievement, illness, willpower, imagination, and overcoming it. In the college years, which were from 1875 to 78, Tesla then was able, because his father said, "Okay, we'll do it," sent him to the Polytechnic School in Graz, Croatia, the best school that was available at the time, I believe. And so study day and night he did. Tesla gained knowledge of several languages. He read several libraries, including, to my amazement, the entire works of Voltaire. That's quite an accomplishment in and of itself. He devoted himself to physics, math, and mechanics, achieved honors in it, took 9 exams, but interestingly enough, I read that he never really received a diploma from it. But no matter, his talent continued uninhibited, I guess you could say. Tesla also became more social and confident, and he, at this particular time, he was able to start developing his own unique views, especially with perpetual motion machines and the beginnings of the polyphase induction motor, for which he is most famous. Tesla then was in Prague in 1880, and at the age of 24, he suffered a complete nervous breakdown. This is, I believe, the 3rd time that he was seriously ill, and it was his strain from studying so much. At this time, he also exhibited extraordinary sight and hearing. He claimed he could hear thunderclaps 550 miles away. Something happened to him neurologically that made his brain particularly susceptible to these subtle vibrations at such distances. So he thought from this that he was incurable, and he was given megadoses of bromide or potassium. At this time then, he did another turnaround by memorizing the complete script of Goethe's Faust. And you remember, Faust is another story of transformation, where Faust is tempted by the devil to give up his self-integrity, basically, and for riches and wealth and anything else that he could imagine. But no, Tesla's health and vigor of mind returned. Okay, background. Now, I mentioned he had this extraordinary sight and hearing, particularly at this time. And the story goes that he was walking with a friend through a park and then had experienced a sudden flash, whereupon he squatted down and drew a diagram in the sand with a stick. This was the first rendition of the induction motor, which he later showed to the 1891 American Institute of Electrical Engineers. And here you see a picture of the original patent. So what was there about Tesla? Tesla was certainly impassioned by everything he did. And he even quotes here, "When natural inclination develops into a passionate desire, one advances toward his goal in 7-league boots." This is a political cartoon you're seeing here that seemed to fit the bill. And I would ask you, what is the state of your passion about your project, invention, or research? And what size is your boot? Now we're almost to the end of the background, and I do want to do a few more things here. Tesla, when he recovered, went to Budapest, Hungary. That was 1881, and he worked as a draftsman for the telephone exchange power plants. Later, he went to Paris, France, which you see in the lower right-hand corner, and he worked for the Continental Edison Company, enjoying himself strolling the boulevards, bathing in the River Seine, and also meeting a whole lot of people, including some Americans who really admired Tesla's ability at billiards. Of course, he was very mathematical, and I'm sure he figured out the geometry of billiards extremely well. And what happened as a result of these friendships is that these Americans urged him to go to America, where it was arranged by a letter of introduction to meet Thomas Edison, who would become his rival for the introduction of what kind of power are we going to implement in our country. And those of you who know something about Tesla and Edison, Tesla won the Battle of the Currents, as it's called. And this is where I stop and summarize a little bit about what was there in the character and him and Tesla growing up that we can learn from. So I'm going to review these. His natural inclinations. Obviously, mechanical and electrical ability, taking things apart, seeing how they run. An inventiveness, which he developed from an acute observation of nature. He was able to experience flashes of light and vivid images triggered by external events, such as the traumas that he experienced as a very young child, enabling him to develop acute powers of imagination and the ability to conjure up images, which he utilized throughout his life in his inventiveness. I hadn't mentioned, but he did have a partial, at least, eidetic memory, which means that he could see something and that he could hold an image of that in his inner mind, which helped him tremendously through his studies. And his ability to retrieve information that he'd stored in his mind. He had obviously superior powers of reasoning and logic, later in life attested to by his many patents and the fact that he was a very erudite man when he chose to speak. He demonstrated foresight and vision and extreme, I'll call it clairvoyance and intuition. He foresaw himself as he won the Battle of the Currents and developed the power plants at Niagara Falls. Later in life, he had visions of his mother who was on her deathbed, and he fled there to be with her before she passed on. And perhaps more well-known, he had visions of future energy and power with his wireless transmission and his development and construction of Wardenclyffe Tower, which never came to be because it was not properly funded. But anyway, he also had extraordinary sight and hearing, in which, for example, he was able to conjure up and draw from his creative mind the polyphase induction motor, for which he is very famous. So here's just a few examples, right? Now, we've already gone through the traumas, but just to remind you, his brother dies. He's traumatized at 5 years old. He projected a series of illnesses at the age of 10, malaria and cholera at 14 and 17, and then he had a nervous breakdown from studying too much at the age of 24. So he had this kind of merry-go-round kind of thing where he would get ill, he would pull himself up by some means, an inspiration, and then he'd be down again, and this happened any number of times. His inspirations, well, I've already alluded to that. He developed extreme willpower and self-control as his result of these illnesses and what inspired him, for example, with A Body and with the Mark Twain books. His father let him study engineering, his real heart passion. He was inspired by his physics teacher, Professor Sekulik, and he also was able to memorize Goethe's Faust, which helped out a lot. He had quite the memory and capacity for learning. because I was really impressed again by his reading all of the libraries that he could find, and then all of Voltaire too. That was quite an accomplishment. So he had a lot of discipline and scholarship, which he learned beginning with his mother and father, who were very well educated, mature people. And he was able to go to the best schools. He continued his learning throughout his lifetime and had, not unlike Albert Einstein, he had lifelong curiosity for how does it work? What can we do? What can I create? Now I want to give you just a little bit of information about how we're going to connect up some of these abilities with consciousness and with consciousness science, which I am calling here resonance science. Now, I'll preface this by saying I've been studying consciousness as primary rather than the standard scientific paradigm, which is everything stems from matter. I don't believe that's true. I am a fan of David Bohm and others who are following in his footsteps to challenge that paradigm. And so when we're talking about consciousness, we're talking about energy and a lot of other things. So this has been my passion, to study this in the relationship between consciousness and what I'm going to introduce to you, quantum mechanics, and how that relates to dimensions of consciousness which we can access. Okay, so this is a quote by Tesla that I think I've seen this at every single extraordinary technology conference hosted by Tesla Tech. And I think it says a lot, and that's why it's quoted a lot. If you want to find the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. It's all about that, and frequency. All of this stems from consciousness. Now, Tesla himself had a resonance theory, he called it, where he thought that an electromagnetic viewpoint unified the material and spiritual origins of the universe and mankind. And this was known in those days as luminiferous ether, which as a unified, dynamic, and undifferentiated field of time, space, and energy on all physical levels, joined space and time as different states of excited energy, bridging multi-realities. That's a mouthful for sure. Luminiferous ether was very popular in these times. It, of course, changed with general and special relativity as introduced by Albert Einstein. These days, at the crux of this, Tesla proposed that matter was concentrated light, and its formation resulted from resonant processes in space propagated by the interaction of wave structures. When you tend to think about it, as I'm going to show you, it really is all about light exhibiting vibration and energy and resonance. Okay, so here's some of the assumptions that I take in talking about the rest of it. That everything, and I follow Tesla's point of view in this regard, that everything is vibratory, everything is energy and consciousness. Consciousness is primary. And consciousness also is information. It carries information about how things should form in its expression as it goes from the higher, subtler worlds of vibration into the lower realms, into the emotional and physical. How do we talk about consciousness? Some people will say it's the collective unconsciousness, the mind of God, the reservoir, the matrix. There are several hundred, if not more, words for this. It's all the same thing. It just depends on what you want to emphasize. I'm emphasizing the vibration, the frequency of it as information. And I say that we are entangled with what I call the information highway. This is a word that was also, I believe, coined by David Bohm, the physicist. I believe that if we tune our focus and brain waves, which we can do, into a signal line or harmonic wavelength that connects us up with some of these higher, subtler levels of information, we can access this. And we can do so with the help of our third eye by being more receptive, opening that aperture to receive the information and access it. And in this way, I believe different kinds of information or knowledge are accessible from many different states of consciousness. And I want to try and put this together for you so you see what I'm talking about. I am relying on a principle that I call brainwave synchronization or phase coherence. That the coherence that we create within our whole body and our mind and through our particularly our pineal gland, when we do this, we can access some of these higher states of information that I am sure Tesla was able to do. So there's a scientific basis to this. It's not nothing mysterious. And this is entanglement or superposition. This is where there is a resonance between two or more particles at a distance, but scientists have gone beyond that into multiple and much more complex things in resonance. Of course, we're in resonance in our consciousness. You know, a typical example is you think of someone and the phone rings before you're able to pick it up and dial them. This is a simple example of resonance. So what we're doing is seeking a synchronous vibration or resonance, which is a form of communication or information exchange. And we're going to do this at what I call harmonic octave scales. What I'm going to explain that. What I mean by that is that our thoughts, our bodies, our whole beingness is like a symphony of music. It has a certain harmony, or in some cases, disharmony. But when we're able to synchronize this with higher states of awareness, this is where we can make a connection and perhaps learn something beyond ourselves to help ourselves. So how does this, I also want to talk about, it's not necessarily a new idea. A physicist named Claude Swanson introduced the synchronized universe model to us, where he describes all of this at a deeper quantum mechanical level. And he says the key is synchronous interaction of particles across great distances and times. Now, if you think about time and space as constructs of consciousness, well, those could be collapsed in an instant, perhaps. But there is some science behind this. Actually, in 1945, two famous physicists, Richard Feynman and John Wheeler, came up with something that they called the return trip photon, where they said, when we're seeing the light of a very, very distant star or perhaps galaxy, it's happening simultaneously with us. And that's basically the gist of it. They earned a Nobel Prize for this. It's probably not something that is talked about too much these days, but that is another example of entanglement and instantaneous communication. Okay, I'm going to skip this little slide here, but the point that I want to make with it is that there can be this exchange of information, and photons can form wave packets and a coherence together and discoherence as well. And there could be communication within ourselves and out in the macro universe as well, between different levels of consciousness, as is shown here, kind of like sheets of paper. Okay, here he's showing a higher dimensional structure. This could be in terms of consciousness within ourselves. It could be a collective consciousness. It could be consciousness in the outer universe and also between universes. It can apply at all levels. So what are we accessing? Pardon me, we're accessing information that has been collected within, let us say, the mind of God. And that could be just about anything you can imagine. And behind this is what Nikola Tesla was talking about when he says, my brain is only a receiver. In the universe, there is a core from which we obtain knowledge, strength, and inspiration. I have not penetrated into the secrets of this core, but I know that it exists. And actually, the same thing was also said by Edison. He goes, my so-called inventions already existed in the environment. I've created nothing. Nobody does. So what is happening, he's accessing information that already exists in the creative mind of God and everyone else, and they're bringing it into the physical. I'm convinced that Tesla was able, through his own innate intelligent means, to look into what some people call the astral library or astral museum and access information there to bring it forward into the physical realm for the benefit of everyone. This is a rather complicated, I don't know what we're calling this, a depiction, I guess you could say, where I'm trying to just give you a sense of states of consciousness that are really light and sound. It's all vibration emanating from the higher worlds. And over here on the left, you see increasing frequency and energy as we go from the physical, which you see at the bottom of the chart there. As it goes up, the frequency and energy increase, and vice versa. On the right-hand side, you see from the higher realms down into the physical, more gross levels, you see increasing energy and density. You'll also see here that there are like layers, as was described by Claude Swanson. Also, we have the physical, the astral, which is the emotional, the memory or causal, the mental realm, and the etheric realm. And then we have the higher worlds as well, which are formless and only expressed by light and sound. Everything changes when these vibrations begin to descend into, I'm just saying they descend, into the physical realm. And we have all of these aspects within us, and each level has layers within it as well. Now let's look at this a little closer. What am I talking about when I'm talking about all these levels? And we live in this tiny little area here of the electromagnetic spectrum in our world, which is measured we're all light and sound, we're all consciousness, vibration, energy, and resonance. And that's just that we live in this tiny little realm. And this is just a little part of all that is. On the right-hand side, you see radio, microwaves, infrared. We can't see these, but we can work with them. And then on the other side, we have increasing frequency, as you see there. And then beyond gamma rays, we're into the cosmic. We don't know where it ends on either side. But this is where we live, and that's why we don't see these frequencies of consciousness. But we try to measure them. Light measured in angstroms, sound measured in hertz. And I would suggest to you that to understand a little more about what I'm talking about, we could measure these in terms of octaves, another way of looking at it. And I just want to address this for just a quick second, how an octave works. And why am I doing this? Because I'm aiming for a harmonic synchronization of ourselves with the higher realms of consciousness where we can access and exchange information. An octave, if some of you who know music, you already know this, consists of 8 pitches on a musical scale. Pitches can also be translated into frequencies. And what happens is this is repeated again and again, so that if you have, as I have written down there, if one note, and I don't have my little cursor so I can't show you here, but you can imagine what is middle C. If you have one note, a frequency of 440 hertz, The note an octave above it is twice that, 880 hertz, and the one below it is 220 hertz. So you have a way of measuring these tones or frequencies. And now imagine that we are multiple frequencies, a symphony, if you will. Everything is, I knew a fellow who did a dissertation on the sounds, the frequencies of every single element in the periodic table, and he amplified them by 40 to 45 octaves so that you could hear them, and each one of them is different in a different symphony. Now imagine that there are at least 7,200 octaves beyond the human range, and probably many, many more than that. So now we can fit that into our realms of conscious awareness, starting with the physical, going into the higher regions of the higher mind and beyond. What does this information highway look like? We are exchanging information through frequency at many levels. And we as humans can access these higher levels if we put effort into it. What is it like? It's really, I call them interdimensional strings. Some string theorists also talk about it that way, and I think they're onto something. Many people will talk about the singularity, just a term for when it all began, which is no thing at all. It's just an energy, okay? An energy that we can scarcely imagine. Others will talk about dark light. Not too many people are talking about that, but it's out there. And then from dark light, we have dark energy. Remember, they're kind of synonymous. Then we have energy interacting with dark matter and descending on down into various forms into the physical density, where we have plasma, the fourth state of matter, and many different kinds of plasma now that they're mentioning. Let's see, the figure 14 or so of these comes to mind. There may be more or less there. And then finally into matter, liquid, solid, and gas. And so we've got this descending sort of thing going on of vibration in various forms of harmony, forms of frequency, complex forms of frequency. So that's how it goes. And then, you see, they're all in strings. Like, this is a picture of commonly known as the web of the universe. These are like information streams. And so that's what it's like. They're like radio transmissions, signal lines, strings, wave frequencies. So each one of us is vibrating at our own frequency or symphony. And so can we actually hone these frequencies into where we can reach higher octaves, higher frequencies, and learn from that level of information? We are like a spiritual deep sea diver, connected to one another in universal consciousness through invisible strings or cords that convey information. And now I want to talk about putting this all together with who we are and how we can access this information that surely Nikola Tesla was able to do. So I'm calling this section Human Quantum Potential. This is a shorter section, but I want to emphasize it. And I believe that the pineal gland, which is situated in the center of the head, is actually a key to this. Some people are calling this a crystal transducer, and your gateway to ascension, they're calling it. We already know about the vibratory states of human consciousness, right? We've got the spiritual, we've got the heart, emotional, mental, and spiritual together, which is important. We've got the mental, astral, emotional field, and the physical body. Readily depicted, we know about this, that these chakras, as they're called, also emanate sheaths, an electromagnetic shield around us. Whether we're aware of it or not, some people can see them. And they're centers for the transmission of this life force energy. The reason I put this graphic in there is because these strings of information are accessible to us. I don't know if above to below is accurate exactly, but we can pick them up if we if we can't do it naturally, we can develop that ability. And so the spiritual eye, the pineal gland, which is very much the Egyptian eye of Horus, as you will see, it is a point of contact with the divine mind and operates as a crystal complex computer. And its activation leads to higher realms of consciousness, as I said before. What does this look like? Okay, we're going to take the pituitary gland here. This is what I've learned how it works, the pituitary and the pineal gland. Okay, here is the pituitary down here, and it acts as a negative contact point and a receiver. And then we have the pineal gland marked by the blue X as a positive contact point, and it is a neuroendocrine transducer, which transmit information as signals via the hypothalamus gland directly to the pituitary. And there's a little bit more to make this clearer if you don't already know. But first, I do want to say part and parcel of this are astrocyte cells and pinealocyte cells, which are types of neurons in the pineal gland, and they have the ability to convert subtle electromagnetic frequencies of a higher nature into electrical currents and convey these signals to the cerebral cortex of our brain. So they function as liquid crystals, like a radio receiver and transmitter. And if we're able to quiet our cerebral cortex, our busy minds, we can access this subtler information from higher dimensions of consciousness. So here we have this again. Here's pituitary, here is the pineal, and various parts that, when working together, okay, they're able to create a magnetic field, okay, which is balanced. And this is achieved frequently by meditation or contemplation and relaxation. When you're able to do that, you're able to do some very creative things. At least this is what I have learned from this. So when that relationship is achieved, then what happens is we can manifest more creatively. Not that you can already, but you can enhance that creativity. And you do this by visualizing an intending form, putting that together with the passion of your heart, and you give life to that form. Some of these feelings are springboards, others can be obstructions, because if you have negative thoughts and feelings, it creates a biochemical reaction signal to the neurons to block the pineal and pituitary gland communications. So this is a very quick once over of how this works, but I think it's good. And I would like to I'm frequently asked, well, you know, in our day and age, fluoride actually calcifies our pineal gland, and so that's in our water everywhere. And so people are now, you know, drinking pure water and so on. And they ask me the question, well, how can you clean or detoxify your pineal gland to make it work more effectively? I can tell you from my own practice that I do feel that this enhances my receptivity. And so this is what I have been told works. You take 4 to 6 dried little crushed red pepper flakes like this. You put them in the bottom of an 8-ounce glass. You pour a little bit of this apple cider vinegar over the top, just enough to cover them and no more. And you let it seep for, I don't know, I do it for several hours at least. And then you pour in regular drinking purified water into taste, and then you drink this, and you do this daily or as often as you're able to. And what this does is like it begins to clean, so to speak, begins to sweep away some of those fluoride crystals that are forming on your pineal gland if you have it. So I stuck that in there because people always ask me about that. And now I want to go into my final thoughts about this. Okay, so what else can we do besides this? Understanding how all of this works, from consciousness, energy, frequency, some of the scientific principles of the pineal gland and how it works. What can we do to enhance our own creative ability, much as Tesla did? And that's in every single way that I have talked about here today. So are you ready for this? I'm going to be about 20 minutes. Steve, are we good with this? I'm going to proceed. Okay, we're going to get Teslafied. That should be fun. First things first. Prerequisites to enhance creative reception. This is the soft technology I'm talking about. We, in our bodies, have quite the abilities that I think many of us are not aware of. Not only our whole body, as well as our mind and beyond. And the first thing we need to do that everybody seems to have problems with in our sophisticated culture, right, is clearing the monkeys of the mind. And there they are. We gotta relax. We gotta let that go. And one of the ways you can do that is through breathing techniques. I have a couple. One is called the 369 technique, which is not the 369. Those of you who know something about Tesla, he was talking about something else. But the 369 is 3 seconds deep breath in, 6 seconds hold, 9 seconds or count to 9, exhale, and do this again and again. Another one that I learned that I like a lot is called the Pranayama, which you inhale deeply in your gut, and then you raise that, not real fast, but you raise it up to your heart level or throat. And then finally, one more inhale into your brain. I think this super oxygenates your brain, and things can happen with that, and certainly some relaxation. Other ways are calming music, exercising, people like that one, bathing. Taking nature walks and being alone are things that Tesla did quite a bit to prepare his consciousness to receive. And what we're doing here is we're stilling the pool of our minds so that we can be more receptive to the subtle signals of information coming from our higher consciousness. One of the things I really like that I recommend, these are all my recommendations, all personal choices. I think heart math technology is a good one if you've never tried it and want to. That is because the heart brain is composed of approximately 40,000 neurons that are like the neurons in our brain. And they constantly, the heart and the mind are constantly communicating with one another. So if there's a conflict there, we have a problem, folks. This technology, which is real-time feedback technology, can help one to create an inner balance and a higher coherence so that you're synchronizing all of these things, right? And bring things into better alignment and can increase access to the heart's intuitive intelligence. And so that is a reason why I recommend it. A lot of people in this day and age sometimes have conflicts between the heart and the brain, and that needs to be looked at, and that needs to be healed. I mentioned solitude was something Tesla liked a lot, and he's quoted as saying, "Be alone. That is the secret of invention. Be alone. That is when ideas are born. That is when you are self-reflective within yourself, or you have stilled your mind." Non-time, you see, is really important because you're taking a break from the sensory bombardment of the world. Daydreaming, psychological distancing, allows the subconscious to find remote associations between ideas. That's where the pressure and the stress focuses on the left brain, which is what we don't want, and that blocks out your ability to receive these subtle bits of information you may get. So structured, unstructured time is really very important. And sometimes it's important to also like converse with others, take a break from reading, et cetera, et cetera. Non-time, Tesla used, as I said, a lot. He did a lot of reading, he exposed himself to ideas, and he just kind of settled in with it. He procrastinated a lot, he said, imagining in his head different options and so forth. He says, "My method is different. I do not rush into actual work. When I get an idea, I start at once building it up in my imagination and make improvements and operate the device in my mind. When I have gone so far as to embody everything in my invention, every possible improvement I can think of, and when I see no fault anywhere, I put into concrete form the final product of my brain. So he's able to draw on all of his faculties, not rush things, but consider all aspects of it, from the intuitive side to the intellectual side, from the ideas around him to new ideas which he can conjure up in his own mind. One technique I'd like to tell you about is called intentioning or focus. Now, Tesla really could focus his will and use his intentioning and vivid imagination. So make note, because thoughts are like things, they're radio signals. And do they attract the information you're looking for? Quite possibly. I think that's possibly something that Tesla did as well. I would caution you to protect your mind field. Don't let others influence you if you can help it, depending on the situation and the question or intention. And ask for assistance. Ask in prayer. Ask in some kind of way the universe, I've got this problem and I'd like help in solving. Just simply ask the universe for assistance. Be alone, quiet the mind, and allow the blending of all aspects of self to come together. Notice at the same time your cycles of creativity. Are you a morning or night person? Do you work with the cycles of the sun or the cycles of the moon? Do this when you are in your best creative space that you're aware of. And what you do is you visualize the heart center. Choose positive thoughts, positive questions, eliminate any sense of negativity, and then you visualize and experience energy in the shape of a swirling cone. Gold at the top, blue in the middle, and silver at the bottom. And then what happens is you direct your energy to penetrate these subconscious, conscious, and soul minds, or higher self minds within you, and you just hold that space. When you're successful, I don't think the negativity can penetrate your field, like doubt that is going to happen, for example. Consciously practice this. And also, if you can, put it on the back burner of the mind. In other words, don't hold on to it too tight. Think of it in a passionate way and then just let go and listen to your inner self, recognizing the difference between the energies that are coming forward to you in your receptive mind. It is said that when soul or the higher self answers, it creates a warmth in the heart. If it's the answer you're looking for. And if you get confusion, misunderstanding, nothing is happening, that you're not going to get the answer that you're seeking that time. Other techniques people use, soft technology, are yoga and meditation. Been around for ages. Purpose of it? Harmonic synchronization or brainwave phase coherence. My favorites are looking at those of the Vedantic teachings and those of Vivekananda. And Vivekananda was one of the persons that greatly influenced Nikola Tesla. He studied with him. He studied these teachings. I'll get into that a little bit more. I want to make a distinction between meditation and contemplation. Meditation is largely passive and receptive. You ask and then you wait. Contemplation is a much more active, where you get involved in the creation of the images and the answers that you're seeking. And I think that's a good thing. Whatever way works for you. I think contemplation was something that Tesla did a lot. Transcendental meditation has been around a long, long time. You can read all about that. I like to talk about Neurot and Surot techniques that are Vedantic. One is visualization, the other is the use of sound to create a state of frequency to where you can get the coherence you're looking for into the higher levels of awareness, I call them. Okay. Swami Vivekananda, as I said, is one of Tesla's teachers. And Tesla studied with him quite a bit. Vivekananda came to the United States in, I guess it was 1893 at the Chicago World's Fair, and he planned on meeting with the three leading scientists of the day, one of whom was Tesla. The other, he met Lord Kelvin in the UK, and he also met with Walter Russell. These three he felt were the leaders in science and what was happening. And interestingly enough, this particular cosmology, which is Hindu, was in perfect harmony with modern science at the time and still is today. If you look at the periodic table they talk about, it's very, very similar to our present day, although we have gone and we have exceeded that quite a bit. Ancient Vedic teachings are old, old, old. They believed in the correspondence of the Brahman and infinite light, the source of all creation. Then they believed that matter and spirit were together, one and the same on a continuum. So they had quite a cosmology and knowledge of science. Interestingly enough, they also talked that yoga was the technology. This yoga are these techniques that I'm telling you about. They're the discipline of action in order to reach these states of higher awareness. I'm rushing through it. One of my favorites is Surat Shab Yoga. Same purpose, harmonic synchronization, brainwave phase coherence. And this was taught by Sri Kirpal Singh. He was a spiritual leader of great stature, and he taught the sound current, so that if you use different sounds or different mantras, that you can get your body to be vibrating, and you can help hopefully catapult yourself into higher frequencies that way. And he did teach the sacred hue, which I believe is a universal sound of all sounds. It is used by some of the esoteric sects, such as Islamic, Sufi, and modern day Ekankar, among others. Now, a few more techniques, and then we're almost finished and ready for some questions, because I've rushed through quite a bit of this stuff. I am partial to the Robert Monroe Institute HemiSync. So what does this do? A lot of us, myself included, probably rely on the left part of our brain a lot. Some people are pretty well developed in the right part of their brain, but what we want is a whole brain sync. And this is what these techniques do using headphones. They create a frequency following response in the electrical activity of the brain. And they generate complex, multi-layered audio signals, which would put the brain in a rhythm using both sides so that you can operate down the corpus callosum. And this will enable you to enhance your relaxation, your meditation, and other techniques, and perhaps experience some extraordinary states of conscious awareness. I like this technique a lot, and I highly recommend it. I'm going to skip through this. We know about this one. Creative visualization has been around for a very long time. You can use this technique as well as sound mantras to, obviously Tesla was using his visualizations quite extensively. He was an expert and a master at it. But this book's been around for a long time too, if you care to look it up. Creative visualizations. Now, this was an animation. You can't see it operating, but you would stare at it. This is a 3D animated tesseract, which you can download from the internet and use on yourself. By focusing on this single object, it kind of puts your brain to rest, because your brain gives up on trying to figure out how this thing actually works. I'm sorry we can't show it as an animation, but it's interesting. So a little bit of self-hypnosis to get you into like a theta state where you can be more creative might be something to try. You could try scrying, which Nostradamus is famous for, or a little bit of hypnosis. And I thought to myself, well, you could try working with the Tesla resonance lamp that's so popular out there. See if staring at that puts your brain in a sort of a groove, and see what happens. Another technique is lucid dreaming that you can learn. This is to create a state between waking and dreaming. where you're able to control some of the aspects in the dream and also access certain parts of the unconscious mind, which will enable you to access also information that might not be so available to you in waking consciousness. So there are a number of references out there. This has been around a long time. Stephen LaBerge, Exploring the World of Lucid Dreaming. And he gave a technique I think is really terrific for all of you. So I'm going to go through this. It's called Imagine the Ideal Workshop. Here, what you do is you create an environment. You mock this up consciously and work with this in the dream state. You've got your tools, your libraries, your workbenches, your machines, anything you need for your project. And you enlist helpers. You could even invite Tesla and his assistants. Mock it up. Wizards, Galactic Council, you name it, whatever is your fancy. Then you build your dream of this to generate solutions to any project that you happen to be working on. So you phrase an intention or an image and you incubate your dream. Also, I caution you to devise a method to wake up in the dream state, because often people will do this successfully, but then they fall asleep into a deeper delta state and they forget all about what they dreamed. If you can, some people used to raise their arms in the air, and then when they fell down because they had fallen into the deeper sleep, and then that wakes them up and they remember. Or you might set your alarm clock or your watch for a certain number of minutes after you get started with this. It's important to write down some of the things that come to mind. You might not know how they all connect in the end. Just keep a journal of whatever it is you receive and see if there's some patterns or clues, whatever, and do this repeatedly. So here we have an example of a man. What do you imagine here? Here's your work area, right? And here's Tesla. What would you like to imagine? That's what I challenge you to do. A couple of more slides. A little more exotic technique might be trying remote viewing. You're largely using your right brain and you're trying to gain information in distant time and space, shielded from the normal five senses. Now this, if done properly, I'm told, involves other people, but you could try it by yourself. Maybe you would call this clairvoyance, I don't know. But you could use this with other techniques such as map stousing, the binaural beat and tones of the hemisync and so forth, because I do think time travel is important. You can access information that you might need from the past as well as the future. And then finally, last but not least, when we're through with our remote viewing, soul travel, which is you're traveling out of your core higher self essence. There is a difference there than when you're traveling in a dream body that might be an astral body, for example. You're moving, you're all light and sound, you have a knowingness, it's wordless, thoughtless, formless. It is just a joyful place to be, which some people have experienced, and they bring back information to share with us all. It is another way. It takes a great deal of practice, I believe, to do that, but some people are very handy at it. And they come back with a knowingness. They know just what to do, how to act, and what have you. And I'd like to close with this quote from William Turbo, who is the grandnephew of Nikola Tesla. He's quoted in the book Nikola Tesla's Electricity Unplugged, which was edited by Dr. Thomas Falone. And this quote says, "Every man should use his intellect, not as he uses his lamp in the study, only for his own seeing, but as a lighthouse uses its lamps, that those afar off on the sea may see the shining and learn their way." And I would like to add to it, it's not only our intellect, but our whole body of our intuitive, creative abilities that are God-given that we can draw on. These two in tandem can help us to access and share information of unbelievable quality that will help us individually in every part of our lives, not only just with our inventions and so on, or projects, but in our relationships with others and so on. So I hope that this has been useful information to you, and I am ready to take some questions if anybody out there has some things that they'd like to ask. Thank you so much, Steve.
You're welcome.
And everybody.
It seems like we're having difficulties, and some of it the people won't be able to see the slide. If you can contact me later and let me know what you're listening or watching from, I would really appreciate it. But I found the information tonight very informative. You know, I picked up some new things I'm going to try, and I believe that this the tree that you're presenting, Suzanne, is helping us go into like the quantum reality that I think that is really out there, and I think that that's going to be the future. More and more physical. I mean, they just built a quantum computer now, and they're transmitting information quantumly now. So this quantum stuff it is the future, and I hope we can present more of it through our conferences.
Well, Steve, that is something that I have been working on for now about 15 years, to be exact. And I was inspired to pursue this. I had no knowledge that I would do it when I attended one of the extraordinary technology conferences in 2007, and I asked a question. With all the troubles that the standard paradigm has, the flaws, the mistakes that people have noted, because we don't have all the answers yet, I said, why aren't engineers, scientists, physicists, mathematicians going to the sacred literature, which I was very familiar with, for some clues at least, and answers to questions, like clues that are given in the Vedanic teachings, as just one example. And because I asked that question of myself, I was looking for information. I decided to check it out and research it myself. And that research over a period of time became a passion to understand. And then in my journey, I came across quantum mechanics, the energy, the vibration, the consciousness of everything. And this is what I have pursued. And I agree with you completely that some of the keys to this are in quantum mechanics, which is going to help us bridge that which we have traditionally called the spiritual life with the physical life. And our understanding of that and the exchange of information that can happen in consciousness is going to help us in untold ways.
Well, like I say, I believe that we are going towards a quantum world, and we actually, as bad as the time seems sometimes, it's kind of exciting, because things are accelerating, and who knows where we're going to be, like even 3 months from now to a year from now. But in the meantime, I think I'm going to call that a night unless you have another comment. I
want to thank you and those of you who are listening or will be listening, because this talk is going to be available on YouTube afterwards, right?
Yes.
Yeah, or you might want to mention that a little bit more about that to people, how they can access this information.
Yeah, it's just easiest way is to go to teslatech.info, and I have a YouTube directory built up where you can go through. We've sorted them by conferences and by speakers. So if you go to the conference speaker, you can look up all the various conferences we have. We have all the extraordinary technology conferences, all the exotic research conferences, and now we're just starting to put up all the global science conferences. We have about 30 years worth of conferences, various conferences available, will be available through the YouTube channel. Most of that will be available through members, although we have at least 300 videos available to you as subscription.
Yes. I would like to also mention several of my talks. I have been a speaker at the Tesla Tech conferences almost every year with one exception. So you have quite a few of my talks available to be viewed, and most of these are of a little more technical nature as I'm exploring the bridge between what I call universal spirituality, energy, free energy, and quantum mechanics. So those are out there as well.
We have a comment here from a LinkedIn user. The day science begins to study non-physical phenomena, it will make more progress in one decade than in all the previous centuries of its existence. And I believe at that time.
That's a Tesla quote. Yeah.
So.
Yeah,
Anyway,
I believe that is certainly true. And Tesla said that how many years ago? Quite a few.
Anyway, I'm going to call it a wrap and catch you all on the other side next week. I'm not sure exactly what's going to happen. I had planned to have Greg Volk fill in for me because I'm supposed to be in San Mateo at a conference there. And I'm not sure who we're going to have or how we're going to do it. We may do a new format. But this is a constantly evolving place here, and I encourage anyone who can to try to link up with us for questions afterwards. And thank you all. And Susan, I presume you're going to be at the conference this year.
I sure will be.
Yeah, and I'd like to encourage everyone to take and pre-register as soon as possible. The sooner you do it, the easier it is for us to plan and help inform others. And anyway, it's been a great time with you, and go up there and become an exclusive member and get complete access to all this stuff. We've just put up the 2019 DVDs, and the 2021s are in progress. So now's an excellent time to join because you have access. Normally that set would cost like $300. So join and take advantage of it. Thank you much. Good evening.
Thank you, Steve. And good night, everybody.
Yeah, bye.